All right, let's jump right in. We're going to be talking about a book that landed like an absolute bombshell back in 1978, and, its shockwaves are still being felt today across tons of different academic fields. This is our explainer on Edward Said's groundbreaking and, yes, deeply controversial book, Orientalism. And what's so perfect is that we can start with the book's very first cover. I mean, just look at this painting. It's got everything. It's mysterious, it's exotic, it's kind of sensual, and maybe a little bit dangerous. This image is the perfect example of what Said was talking about. It's a constructed, romanticized, and ultimately distorted Western fantasy of the East. The critique literally starts before you even turn the first page.
And this is exactly why the book was so explosive. See, Said wasn't just talking about politics or foreign policy. His whole point was that this way of thinking was everywhere. It was in art, in scholarly books, in novels, basically woven into the very fabric of how the West understood the world. That's a huge claim, right? So let's break down what he actually meant.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of the matter. What is this groundbreaking critical concept he called Orientalism?
Well, before Said came along, the word Orientalism pretty much just meant, the study of the East. It was an academic field, that's it. Said completely redefined it. He argued that it was actually a powerful system of representation, a kind of lens that the West used to view places like the Middle East and Asia. And crucially, it was a lens that was all about stereotypes, exaggeration, and a deep-seated feeling of superiority.
To really get it, he broke it down into 3 connected ideas. So first, it's the academic tradition. But second, and this is the big one, it's a style of thought. A deep-rooted habit of just splitting the world into these 2 separate and unequal boxes, the Orient and the Occident, the East and the West. And third, he argued this wasn't some accident. This whole way of thinking worked as a political tool. It was a way to justify colonialism and Western power. And this right here gets to the core of that style of thought. It's all built on these simple, powerful, and totally biased opposites. The West, the Occident, gets to define itself as all the good stuff, rational, superior, civilized. And how does it do that? By defining the East, the Orient, as its complete opposite, irrational, inferior, and primitive. It creates this incredibly strong us versus them mindset.
So here's the absolute crucial takeaway. Said's point was that the Orient you read about in Western books or see in Western art, it wasn't a real place. It was an invention. It was a massive, centuries-long work of fiction created by the West, for the West, to help the West feel good about itself and justify its own power.
So, as you can probably imagine, an idea that big, that explosive, didn't just stay in one little corner of the university. No way. The ripple effect was absolutely immense.
I mean, the book just completely shook things up. All of a sudden, you had scholars in literary theory, history, geography, you name it, who had to stop and re-examine the very foundations of their work. They had to ask, wait a minute, is my field as neutral and objective as I've always been taught?
But its single biggest impact might be this. Orientalism essentially launched the entire academic field of post-colonialism. That's the field that studies the massive, lasting cultural impacts of colonialism and empire. Said's book provided the key ideas, the toolbox to unpack how empire worked, not just with guns and money, but with ideas.
And this quote from the historian Gyan Prakash just nails that shift in thinking. The whole image of the detached, neutral scholar studying another culture from afar, well, that image was shattered. Said's work suggested that even the most well-meaning study of the East couldn't really be separated from the murky business of empire. In his view, knowledge and power were completely intertwined.
But, and this is a huge but, the book was not universally loved. Not even close. It sparked immediate, fierce criticism that is still going on today. So let's be fair and take a look at the counterarguments.
One of the biggest lines of attack was on the history itself. Said talked about this 2,000-year history of Western domination, but critics like Ernest Gellner would point to a map like this one, showing the Ottoman Empire at its height, and say, hold on a second, for centuries the East was a massive military, political, and cultural power. It was often a threat to Europe, not just some passive thing being stared at.
And the criticisms didn't stop there. Beyond the historical timeline, a huge point was that Said seemed to ignore a lot of scholarship that didn't fit his theory. For example, he focused almost entirely on Britain and France, the big colonial powers. But what about all the German scholars who studied the East? Germany didn't really have a big Eastern empire, which kind of complicates the idea that this knowledge was only for colonial domination. Then there is this fascinating accusation of Occidentalism, that Said himself was doing the very thing he criticized, creating this single, unchanging, villainous West. And finally, there was a real concern that the term Orientalism was becoming less of a useful idea and more of a political swear word, a way to just shut down any Western scholar's work on the Middle East without actually debating it.
And listen, this pushback was not polite. Some critics, like Robert Irwin, were just absolutely scathing, calling the book malign charlatanry. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about how polarizing this book was. You either thought it was a revolutionary masterpiece, or you thought it was fundamentally dishonest. There wasn't a lot of middle ground.
So, after all that fire and debate, where does that leave us? What is the book's legacy today?
Well, I think it's fair to say that even many of its fiercest critics would agree that Orientalism is a monumental book. Its real importance isn't just about whether every single historical claim was 100% correct. Its importance lies in the fact that it completely changed the kinds of questions people asked. It forced entire academic fields to look in the mirror and grapple with the hidden politics of knowledge.
And that impact is just undeniable. For all the fierce criticism, after Said passed away in 2003, one Lebanese newspaper said he had single-handedly effected a revolution in Middle Eastern studies. Think about that, a revolution. Whether you love the book or hate it, you just can't deny its power to completely reshape a field of study.
And that really brings us to the big, lingering question the book leaves us with. It's a question that's maybe more important now than ever. After Orientalism, we can't just pretend that the way we see another culture is somehow pure or objective. So the challenge he leaves for all of us is this: how can we study, depict, and try to understand other cultures without falling into the very traps he so powerfully pointed out? It's a tough question, and there's definitely no easy answer.